cancer and tumor cell formation. In spite of all the confusion around the development of cancer, horrible, horrible, scary disease that we all live under the threat of, as it turns out, we actually do have a good idea about what exactly it is that causes a cell to become cancerous. It's called hypoxia, or low oxygen. And if you've even listened to the bright side a tiny little bit, it's almost impossible for you not to hear about low oxygen or hypoxia. It truly is a major cause of breakdown, a major cause of inflammatory disease, a major cause of degeneration, a major cause of immune dysfunction, and, as it turns out, low oxygen levels at a cell level, actually the cell membrane level, hypoxia or low oxygen, is associated with cancer. And if you think that's simplistic, if you think that's not possible, oh, my doctor didn't tell me about that. My oncologist, who's poisoning me with chemotherapy, he never said anything about oxygen and respiration and how cancer cells are anaerobic cells. My oncologist is a doctor, and he never said that. Well, tell your oncologist or tell your doctor to go study Dr. Otto Warburg, Nobel laureate. Have him go read the paper that was published in the journal Science in 1956 on the origin of cancer cells. In the paper, Dr. Warburg is pretty explicit about the formation of cancer, and Dr. Warburg did a lot of research. In fact, Dr. Warburg was well known for his laboratory research that preceded his conclusions. Paraphrasing Dr. Warburg from the article that was published in Science, first cells suffocate, then they become cancerous. Quote, cancer cells originate from normal body cells in two phases. The first phase is the irreversible injuring of respiration. The irreversible injuring of respiration is followed as the second phase by a long struggle for existence by the injured cells to maintain their structure. From the book Cancer, Step Outside the Box. And by the way, if anybody is dealing with cancer or wants to know about cancer, has a friend with cancer, a family member, I am sending out copies of this Cancer Step Outside the Book via PDF file. Shoot me an email and put on there Step Outside, and the subject put Step Outside the Box, and I'll send you this it's a 400-plus page book on cancer Step Outside the Box. Anyway, quoting from page 84 in the book Cancer Step Outside the Box, Dr. David Gregg, quote, cancer does not cause cells to turn anaerobic, that is, not breathe oxygen, but rather it is stabilized anaerobic respiration, meaning cells that do not get energy from oxygen. It is stabilized anaerobic respiration that is, quote, the single cause that turns normal cells that depend on aerobic respiration into cancer cells. Through deep breathing techniques is the most important thing you could do. You can actually deal with cancer. Make sure you're using your antioxidants. You always want to balance out antioxidants with oxygen, as we've said so many times before. Oxygenation is kind of a dual-edged sword, because oxygen is important for cells to get energy from. Oxygenation pulls electrical energy into cells, but oxygen also has a toxic effect and a burning effect. And antioxidants are the way nature is set up to protect us from excess oxygen. So when you're practicing your deep breathing techniques, make sure you're using your vitamin C and vitamin E and phytonutrients and selenium and zinc, all of which can act to protect you from oxygen. Keeping inflammation under control is super important. If you're interested in driving oxygen through the electric train of health into a cell, inflammatory processes will act to blockade cells from oxygen delivery. I'm talking here micro-inflammation. When we talk about inflammation at the cell level, I'm not talking about the big macro-inflammation that you get when you break a bone or get a black eye. I'm talking about tiny micro-inflammation, which eventually will build up and form macro-inflammation. But I'm referring here to the kind of inflammation that builds up very, very slowly at the cell level. This kind of inflammation, for the most part, means a defensive response, an activated immune system, which in turn, again, for the most part, means foods that ignite the inflammatory fires. Surprise, surprise, another food connection. It's not so much that specific foods, quote, cause, unquote, cancer. It's that specific foods activate an inflammatory response, which leads to cell suffocation, which leads to deficiencies in oxygen, which then can turn a cell cancerous. Keeping fluids moving in the body is also important. Exercise, staying away from pro-inflammatory foods. Sugar is probably the most pro-inflammatory food. If you're interested in a food that, quote, causes, unquote, cancer, you don't have to look much further than sugar, which we're all eating so much of, 60, 70 pounds per person per year, even more. Blood clotting, thick blood, thromboses, clogging up, coagulation, these are all big-time risk factors for the formation of cancer, as you would expect, given the relationship of tumor formation to poor oxygenation of cells, which is a direct result of clotted, coagulated blood. In addition to avoiding sugars and inflammatory foods and processed foods, drinking more. The book by Dr. Becker where he talks about reversing cancer is called Cross Book, and he was famous for pointing out the electrical conductivity issues associated with healing and regeneration and health and wellness. And in the book Cross Currents, which is not as well known as his book Body Electric, he talks about reversing cancer reversal. Let's see, that's called Cross Currents. It's a little hard to find that book, Cross Currents. It's much easier to find the Body Electric. For you guys who want to get a copy of this paper on the origin of cancer cells that was published in February of 1956 by the famous Dr. Otto Warburg, and it's pretty easy to read. It's a scientific paper, so you need to have a little bit of technical savvy. But if you're interested in getting a copy of this paper, send me an email, ben@ksco.com, and I'll send this out to you. And again, if anybody's interested in getting this book, Cancer, Step Outside the Box, I will also send a copy, a PDF file of the book as well. So shoot me an email, ben@ksco.com. For you guys who sent me emails asking me questions, I am so sorry, but I get literally hundreds of emails a month, and I just don't have a way of answering everybody. I want to answer as many people as I can, and I try to get back to you. And if you put your phone number on your emails. All right, thanks so much for joining us on The Bright Side. Once again, we're talking a little bit about genetics. Still getting letters about GMOs and GMO vitamin C and genetically modified Maltodextrin, etc. Listen, folks, here's a scoop on GMOs and here's a scoop on genes. As we said yesterday, genes, little pieces of DNA, are responsible for the manufacturing of protein in a cell. Cells do lots of things, but their main role in life is to make proteins. And there are literally thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of different proteins that these little cells can make. That's all genes do. They make proteins. Genes do not make vitamins. Genes do not make minerals. Genes do not make phytonutrients, and by make I mean code for. The only thing a gene does is it codes for a specific protein. The problem with GMOs, genetically modified organisms, and by the way, we have been genetically modifying organisms for eons, for millennia. Simply grafting and doing things that gardeners have been doing and farmers have been doing for 1,000 years is considered GMO, genetic modification. What's happened over the last 30 or 40 years is we've gotten really good at it, and we know where the genes are in the DNA, and we know how to insert different genes to make things happen. This is most certainly not a good thing. Once you start playing with the genetics of a cell, you don't really know what you're getting. However, corn, or vitamin C, that comes from genetically modified corn is not a genetically modified vitamin C. The vitamin C that comes out of a genetically modified corn, and most vitamin C does come from corn, and most corn is genetically modified, has not been genetically modified. It is a purified product. It is not a protein. Genetic modification is only about proteins, and it's not a good thing because once you start inserting genes from different creatures or different plants into other plants, you don't really know what you're getting as far as the proteins go. The vitamin C is still vitamin C, and it doesn't matter whether that vitamin C comes from a genetically modified corn plant or whether it comes from a apple or whether it comes from a genetically modified orange. The vitamin C molecule, the ascorbic acid molecule, whether it comes from an orange or whether it comes from genetically modified corn or whether it comes from your liver or whether it comes from anywhere, is the same molecular structure, period. And anybody who tells you that genetically modified vitamin C, vitamin C that comes from genetically modified corn is somehow a problem doesn't know chemistry. Just go to Wikipedia or go to Google Images and look at the vitamin C structure. Look at the little kind of chemical structure with the lines and the shapes. Vitamin C is a very simple molecule. That little molecule, ascorbic acid, is the same no matter where it comes from. And when you eat your vitamin C, whether you're eating it from a genetically modified, whether that vitamin C came from a genetically modified plant or whether it came from an apple or whether you're getting your vitamin C from an orange, wherever, by the time it makes it into your intestine, by the time it's been ground up in your stomach and by the time it leaks through into the small intestine and by the time it gets absorbed, it is absorbed as ascorbic acid, or more accurately as ascorbate, and that's it. And it doesn't matter where it came from. I don't know how else to say that, people. Now, I'm not saying GMO is good. It's not good. It's awful. And we shouldn't be tweaking around with the genetics of our plants. But the fact of the matter is, vitamin C that comes from a genetically modified plant, by the time it makes it into your intestine, is the exact same molecule as any other vitamin C. And as far as maltodextrin goes, maltodextrin is a sugar. It is a long chain of glucose molecules. Go look up the chemical structure. You know, if we're going to be talking about chemistry like we know what we're talking about, we got to at least understand some of the basics. Now, you get these craziness on the internet, people who just spew stuff and don't understand the basics of how chemistry works. If we're going to have opinions, at least we should understand some of the basics about how this whole idea of genetic modification and biochemistry and chemical structures is put together. So anyway, maltodextrin is a long chain of glucose molecules. Now, I check out the internet as much as anybody else does, and I see these websites that talk about maltodextrin as being an excitotoxin. And I think, for some reason or another, Dr. Russell Blaylock, whose work I respect tremendously, the guy is brilliant, and I've read both his books, Excitotoxins and Health Secrets, and I can't see anywhere where Dr. Blaylock talks about maltodextrin. Now, maybe he does, and maybe I'm missing something, but I keep seeing him quoted on the internet as saying that maltodextrin is some kind of excitotoxin, or maltodextrin is a disguised term for MSG. From a chemistry standpoint, now, I'm willing to be open-minded about this. If somebody can show me how a long string of glucose molecules is somehow the same as monosodium glutamate, which is an amino acid derivative, completely different chemical structure. But if somebody can tell me how MSG is somehow related to maltodextrin, I'm all ears. I want to hear. But from a chemistry standpoint, I can't figure out what people are talking about or writing about on the internet when they make this connection between excitotoxins like MSG, bad stuff, and maltodextrin. Maltodextrin, from a chemistry standpoint, is nothing more than a polymerized or long chain of glucose molecules, long chemical structure, a polysaccharide. It's a sugar. Monosodium glutamate is an amino acid. It's like apples and oranges, like red and blue. They're not anything to do with each other. Now, unless somebody can show me how MSG has been contaminated or maltodextrin has been contaminated, or I don't know how you can make that connection. Maltodextrin is a thickener. It's a polysaccharide. Doesn't have much of a sweet taste. It's used to create to give products a certain thickness and a certain body, mostly liquid products a certain thickness and body. So anyway, I don't mean to be preachy here, but I'm all ears if somebody can show me how MSG is related to maltodextrin, if somebody can show me how maltodextrin in any way, shape, or form is an excitotoxin. And I wanted to talk about cancer and genetics, so I got a little sidetracked. We'll come back. We'll talk 4261 is our number. We're talking a little bit about GMOs and genetics. I wanted to talk about cancer and genetics, but I got a bunch of emails. I got 3 emails back to back about maltodextrin and about GMO corn and vitamin C, and it just made me think about how much misunderstanding there is about this idea of GMOs and maltodextrin. Maltodextrin I hear about periodically. Apparently, somebody somehow got the idea that Dr. Blaylock, Russell Blaylock, is making a link between maltodextrin and MSG, and I can't imagine Dr. Blaylock doing that. And as I say, I've looked through his books, his 2 wonderful books, Excitotoxins, The Taste That Kills, and Health.